There is a moment in every person's financial life when everything changes. At night, you go to sleep with your account frozen, and the next day, you wake up with your money making more than you earn with your job. This is very powerful, but banks will start to hate you and to do their best to stop you and drain your account. Because whether people like to admit it or not, the financial system is not designed to help you become independent. It is designed to keep you dependent, predictable, and profitable as a customer. And nothing threatens the system more than an individual who reaches certain net worth milestones that fundamentally change the way their money grows. And that is why, whether they would ever say it out loud or not, banks hope you never discover these milestones, let alone reach them. So make sure to stay until the end to understand when these milestones will arrive. Leave a like and let's start. Now let me ask you something. When you think about building wealth, what picture appears in your mind? Do you imagine someone who was born into money? Someone signing documents in a tall glass office? Someone who never had to worry about their bills? Someone using complicated financial jargon to make it sound like wealth is a privilege reserved only for people with special access? That is exactly what most people imagine, and it's exactly what banks are happy for you to believe. Because if wealth looks mysterious and unachievable, you will continue playing the game they want you to play. You'll keep saving the way they tell you to save, borrowing the way they tell you to borrow, and earning them fees, interest, and control every step of the way. But something interesting happens when you truly understand how money grows. Your net worth does not increase in a straight, predictable line. It grows like a snowball rolling down a mountain. The beginning is painfully slow, almost insulting at times. And that slow start is what convinces millions of people that the entire process isn't worth it. But once that snowball reaches certain sizes, once it crosses certain thresholds, the growth accelerates so dramatically that banks can no longer profit from your dependence. Those thresholds are the 3 net worth milestones that banks desperately hope you never reach. And yet, they are mathematically undeniable, predictable, and accessible to anyone with patience and consistency. Now let's begin with the first milestone, $100,000. People hear that number and assume it represents nothing more than 10% of $1 million. But that is not how wealth works. Banks love when people think that way, because it convinces them that the progress they make in the early years is insignificant. It causes frustration, it causes fatigue, it causes people to give up long before their financial snowball has a chance to gather real momentum. And that is exactly how the system keeps people stuck. Because the truth is that the first $100,000 represents the hardest, steepest climb of the entire wealth building journey. It is the phase where almost all the growth comes from your own effort, your own savings, your own discipline. It feels slow because it is slow, but it is also the foundation that every later explosion of growth depends on. Let's make this real with simple numbers. Imagine you invest $500 per month. Nothing extreme, nothing impossible, just $500. At a 7% annual return, it takes almost 8 years to reach that first $100,000. And during those 8 years, most of the money in your account is money you personally contributed. The growth seems small, almost disappointing at times. And that is where banks prefer you to remain forever, stuck in the stage where the numbers look unimpressive. Because unimpressive numbers encourage people to either stop investing or save less aggressively, which in turn keeps them dependent on the financial products the banks sell. But if you push through that stage, if you ignore the slow beginning, everything changes the moment you hit that first $100,000 of net worth. Because from that point forward, for the first time in your life, your money begins generating more money than you ever imagined possible. Think about this. It took almost 8 years to reach that first $100,000. But do you know how long it takes to go from $100,000 to $200,000 if you keep investing at the same pace? About 5 years. 5 years to replicate what previously took nearly 8 years. And do you know why? It is because compound growth has reached a size where it can finally begin accelerating. Your returns are no longer tiny percentages of tiny balances. They are percentages of a meaningful foundation. And that is what banks do not want you to understand. Because once compound interest starts building real momentum in your life, you stop needing the banking system in the same way. You stop needing their loans, you stop needing their credit, you stop fearing unexpected expenses. You begin standing on your own 2 feet financially, and independence is the one thing banks cannot profit from. Now let's keep following this journey, because after 13 years of consistent investing, your net worth reaches $200,000. Out of that total, you personally contributed about $78,000. The remaining $122,000 came from growth alone. Your money is officially outperforming you. And this is only the beginning, because around the 18-year mark, your investments cross $400,000 in value. And at this point, 3/4 of your net worth is coming from growth rather than your own contributions. Your money is now producing more income each year than many people receive in raises. And do you realize what that means? It means the power structure has shifted. You are no longer financially vulnerable. You are no longer at the mercy of interest rates, loan approvals, or credit card balances. Your money is now working as hard as the bank's money. And believe me, banks do not like when individuals reach this stage. And this brings us to the second milestone, the one that banks hope you never approach, the one around $650,000 in net worth. Why is this number so important? Because at this level, your money becomes truly dangerous to the traditional banking model. It begins generating the kind of income that makes you less dependent on employment, less vulnerable to emergencies, and less interested in borrowing. You become the type of person who does not need a bank's approval to survive or to take opportunities in your life. And the moment you do not need a bank, the bank loses the ability to profit from you. Think about this. At $650,000 invested at 8%, you could generate more than $50,000 per year in passive income. That is not a fantasy. That is not a theory. That is simple math. And do you know what that does to your life? It eliminates financial fear. It eliminates panic. It eliminates the need to accept bad work environments. It eliminates the pressure to stay at a job you hate because you need every paycheck. It gives you options. And options are the enemy of any system built on keeping people dependent. You could lose your job and still cover the majority of your expenses. You could work part-time and still have a stable financial life. You could start a business without worrying about running out of money. You could travel, study, rest, or reinvent yourself without asking permission from a bank or employer. This is why banks quietly fear the $650,000 milestone. Because at this level, you are no longer their customer. You are no longer a predictable revenue source. You are someone who can say no, and people who can say no are unprofitable. But there is still one milestone left, the milestone that banks hope with every fibre of their corporate existence that you never reach. And that milestone is the $1 million net worth level, the moment when your financial identity transforms completely, when your money becomes a machine that works all by itself, when the system no longer controls you at all. Reaching $1 million in net worth is not just a number, and it is not simply a financial goal to check off a list. It is a fundamental psychological shift, a moment when you feel something inside you change. Because for the first time, you can clearly see that you are no longer operating under the rules that banks expect you to follow. And that is precisely why they hope you never come anywhere close to this milestone. When you cross into 7 figures, even if you do not feel rich, even if the world around you still looks the same, the way you interact with money, work, opportunity, and risk transforms into something that the banking system quietly dislikes. Because a person with $1 million net worth becomes financially untouchable in a way that cannot be undone. You suddenly understand that you have navigated the long, painful years of slow growth. You have made it through the discouraging early stages when every dollar feels like a drop in the ocean. And now you stand at the point where your money grows even when you are asleep, even when you are resting, even when you are not thinking about it at all. The moment you cross this threshold, you see clearly that the banking system never wanted you here, because here you no longer need them. You may choose to use them, but you do not need them, and that distinction changes everything. This milestone, the 7-figure mark, usually arrives after decades of patience, consistency, and discipline, often around the 29-year mark if you invested $500 a month at a modest 7% return. But the timeline is not the important part. The important part is that once you reach it, your fear dissolves. Not completely, not instantly, but enough that you breathe differently. You look at your bank balance, and for the first time, it does not dictate your emotions. You look at unexpected expenses, and they no longer feel like threats. You look at opportunities, and they no longer feel out of reach. You begin to realize that the entire financial system is built on the assumption that most people will never reach this point. Banks depend on that assumption. They thrive on it because people who are financially stable borrow more, use more products, pay more fees, and seek more permission from the institutions that hold the keys. But once you hit a net worth of $1 million, you see the truth with remarkable clarity. Banks do not want you wealthy. They want you almost wealthy, comfortably struggling, always one step behind your goals because that is where their profits live. When you break through their invisible ceiling, you become someone whose money produces income without permission, someone whose assets grow without approval, someone whose financial life is no longer controlled by the products they sell. At $1 million, your investments can generate $40,000 to $50,000 a year in passive returns without you lifting a finger. And while that might not replace your full income, it dramatically alters your financial landscape. Imagine earning the equivalent of an additional salary every year simply by letting your money sit in productive assets. Imagine waking up and knowing that even if every paycheck stopped tomorrow, you would still be safe. You would still be able to pay for your home, your food, your needs, and your life without going into panic mode. Banks do not like customers who feel safe. Safe customers do not borrow out of desperation. They do not accept bad interest rates. They do not carry expensive credit card balances, and they do not fall into the traps that keep the system profitable. And this is exactly why the seven-figure milestone is treated like a secret doorway, a doorway that the financial system would prefer you never discover, because once you cross through it, you become the type of person who sees how the game is really played. But something even more powerful happens once you reach this stage, and it has nothing to do with the number itself. It is the shift in your mindset. You no longer see money as something to be earned and spent. You see it as something that grows, something that multiplies, something that works. You see each dollar as a tiny employee, generating more dollars over time, and you realize that the biggest mistake most people make is that they try to work harder instead of making their money work harder. And when you reach that realization, everything the banks taught you about saving small amounts slowly and borrowing when life becomes difficult and relying on their products for every major decision suddenly feels like an outdated script designed to keep you playing a role that no longer suits you. Once you hit $1 million, the journey accelerates in a way that is almost shocking. The next $500,000 arrives faster than the first. The next million arrives even faster than that. And this acceleration is exactly what banks do not want you to experience, because the more money you have invested, the less likely you are to rely on them for anything significant. Most people never understand that after you hit your first million, you no longer need your money to double to make life-changing progress. You only need it to grow by 50% to reach $1.5 million. You only need it to double to reach $2 million. You only need it to increase by 1/3 to reach $3 million. The hill becomes flatter, the path becomes smoother, the growth becomes faster. And that is the terrifying part for banks, because a customer with accelerating wealth becomes less responsive to fear, less trapped by debt, and less governed by financial institutions. They become free. But let us address a concern that many people have when they think about long-term investing. What about market crashes? What about economic downturns? What about recessions and volatility and uncertainty? Banks love using fear to keep customers predictable. Fearful customers keep money in low-yield accounts. Fearful customers avoid investing. Fearful customers rely on loans instead of assets. But the truth is that market crashes are not the enemy of the long-term investor. They are the fuel. Every downturn in history has been followed by recovery and growth. Every crash has created the conditions for future gains. And the people who continue investing during those downturns end up wealthier, stronger, and more secure than those who pulled back out of fear. Banks will never cheer for you to invest consistently through volatility, because doing so moves you closer to the milestones they hope you never reach. They want you uncertain. They want you nervous. They want you reactive, because reactive customers are profitable customers. Now let us step back and connect the entire journey. The first milestone, $100,000, is where compound growth wakes up. It is slow, painful, discouraging, and intentionally confusing. And banks hope you never push through it because they know that once you do, everything gets easier. The second milestone, $650,000, is where you begin threatening the structure of the system, because your money begins producing an income that can partially or fully replace the need for a job, a boss, or financial dependence. And the third milestone, $1 million, is where you escape the system almost completely. You become financially sovereign. You become a person who cannot be controlled by interest rates or approval processes or sudden emergencies. You become someone who sees the matrix clearly, someone who realizes that wealth is a math equation, not a mystery, and that the forces hoping to keep you from reaching these milestones are not villains in the shadows, but institutions that profit from the public remaining financially uneducated. The important lesson in all of this is that the game of wealth is not designed to reward the fastest, the luckiest, or the most privileged. It is designed to reward the consistent. Anyone with patience, discipline, and a willingness to ignore the noise can reach these milestones over time. And that is exactly what banks fear most, because if millions of ordinary people reach the $100,000 milestone, and then the $650,000 milestone, and then the $1 million milestone, the entire financial industry would need to reinvent itself. Banks make money when you stay dependent. They lose money when you become independent. And independence begins the moment you take the first step toward investing, saving, building, and refusing to let the system convince you that wealth is out of reach. So as you walk away from this, remember that the journey is not about becoming a genius investor or taking extreme risks or chasing the perfect moment. It is about understanding that the financial world is built on simple, repeatable rules that most people simply never use. And if you embrace those rules, if you build slowly, steadily, and consistently, you will eventually reach the milestones banks hope you never reach. And once you do, the world looks different. Opportunities appear everywhere. Stress fades, fear shrinks, and you realize that the power was never in the bank's hands. It was always in yours. And that is the moment when true financial freedom begins. Not with a lottery ticket, not with luck, but with the quiet understanding that you have stepped into a world where the system can no longer hold you back. The real secret behind these 3 net worth milestones is that none of them require extraordinary talent or special access. They only require time, consistency, and the willingness to ignore the noise that keeps most people trapped in financial fear. Banks hope you never realize this, because the moment you do, you begin building a kind of freedom that removes their influence from your life. Reaching $100,000, then $600,000, $150,000, and eventually $1 million turns money from something you chase into something that works quietly and tirelessly for you. And once you step into that world, everything changes. You become someone who lives with choice instead of pressure, someone who moves through life with confidence instead of anxiety, someone who understands that the journey to financial independence was never meant to be fast, it was meant to be inevitable. And the sooner you begin that journey, the sooner you reach the milestones that banks hope you never touch. And the sooner you discover that financial freedom was always within your reach. And the sooner you'll subscribe to this channel, the sooner you will achieve your financial goals. So make sure to subscribe and to click on the video that will appear in the next few seconds, and I'll see you soon. Just a reminder, I'm not a financial advisor. This video is for educational purposes only, and any results depend on your own decisions and actions.